Hay historias que le dejan a uno con la boca abierta. Por ejemplo, la de Tony Wheeler. Tony se sentó en un banco, en un parque de Londres a principios de los 70. A su lado se sentó Maureen, no se conocían, empezaron a hablar y terminaron casándose con el tiempo. Y en el 72 decidieron subirse a un coche de segunda mano con 4 duros para cruzar Europa y Asia con la intención de llegar a Australia. Contaron su viaje y a partir de ahí fueron naciendo un imperio que terminó en la creación de las guías que todos nosotros hemos usado alguna vez para un viaje. Las guías Lonely Planet, que cumplen ahora 50 años, medio siglo. Tony Wheeler, buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Gracias por venir a Hora 25.
Thank you, muchas gracias.
¿Cómo habría sido su vida, señor Wheeler, si no se hubiese sentado en ese banco de ese parque de Londres, si no hubiese conocido a Maureen? ¿Cómo hubiese sido su vida?
It would be very boring. I think I was very lucky that incident happened that changed my life.
Usted nació en Reino Unido, pero creció en Pakistán, en Bahamas, en Estados Unidos. Usted estaba destinado a hacer de su vida un viaje.
It certainly was. My father was working overseas all the time I was growing up. So I grew up in Pakistan, in the Bahamas, and in the United States.
Cuénteme cómo planificaron aquel primer viaje. Quiero hablar de las guías con usted, pero es que aquel primer viaje me interesa tanto.
We bought an old car in London with the idea we would just drive it as far as it went, and it went as far as Afghanistan.
¿Y en Afganistán qué hicieron con el coche?
Well, we got to Afghanistan and we sold it. So we drove from London to Afghanistan, Kabul, and we sold it at the end for €5 profit.
Supongo que en aquellos años había zonas de Asia en las que no era muy habitual ver a una pareja joven viajando. ¿Despertaban ustedes la curiosidad de los demás?
Only a little bit unusual. We thought it was quite a normal thing to do because we met many other young people. It was an exciting thing to do at that time. It was known as the hippie trail.
La ruta hippie con sus pelos larguísimos. Y eso allí, ¿cómo lo gestionaban, lo de verles a ustedes con esos pelazos?
They liked it. I think if you ask people about Afghanistan at that time, they were saying this was the perfect time, that afterwards everything went wrong, but at that time in the 60s and 70s, life was as perfect as it ever could be.
En el mundo de hoy, en 2023, ¿se podría volver a hacer un viaje como aquel, con un presupuesto como aquel?
No, unfortunately, that sort of trip is long gone. But people are doing many other trips, and only 6 years ago, I did a trip on not the hippie trail, but the Silk Road. I spent 4 months traveling from Bangkok through Southeast Asia, China, and all the way to Europe.
Decidió en aquel primer viaje escribir una guía, decidieron, para los que quisieran hacer un viaje parecido al suyo. Al principio todo era muy amateur, creo de hecho que usted iba a las librerías ofreciendo la guía.
Yeah, we decided that we had trouble finding out about the trip we were doing. So we decided we would write a book about it and discovered that many other people wanted that information, and we produced the book ourselves. I took it to the bookshops bought it.
¿Por qué había tanta demanda de un viaje así? ¿Por qué a la gente le interesaba saber cómo había hecho usted su viaje y qué les proponía usted?
I think because at that time it was people my age. Back then, 50 years ago, I was in my early 20s. My wife was 21. People were going further than their parents had gone. There was a lot of, the Beatles were in India. There was a lot of interest in these regions. And we just happened to be the people who made it into a business.
Un negocio, un imperio, el imperio Lonely Planet.
It was a Lonely Planet empire, and it was the right time to do the right thing, and we had a good name. People liked the idea of this Lonely Planet.
¿Por qué funcionan las guías Lonely Planet? ¿Qué tienen de especial las guías Lonely Planet para que la gente las busque? Lo primero que hace uno es comprarse o buscar los billetes en internet a un destino y acto seguido es comprarse la Lonely Planet. ¿Por qué?
I hope so. I think because at that time there were a lot of young people traveling. They were going further than their parents had been. If their parents went through Europe, we went on to Asia, on to Africa, and we didn't have much money. So we were doing guides for young people without much money. That was the real secret.
¿Y a día de hoy siguen siendo así?
No, they've changed a lot. I think that there are still, of course, there are lots of young people traveling, but now we try to cater for everybody. It isn't just young people or young people with that much money. It's people there with I think with a spirit of adventure. They want to go further. They want to see more.
¿Realmente se puede hacer una misma guía para el CEO de una empresa que para el bedel de esa empresa?
It's very different today, but I think people who want to do interesting things, if they're young and adventurous, they will do young and adventurous things, and maybe people who are older like me now, we still like to travel with open horizons, with a view to going to unusual places. So it still happens. People still travel in interesting ways.
La llegada de Internet, el hecho de que todos tengamos ahora Google en nuestro bolsillo y podamos buscar en Google Maps o cualquier plan, eso a ustedes les ha hecho mucho daño, entiendo.
No, I think Google, the two things work together. That you can use a printed guidebook or a digital version of the printed guidebook, and you can use the Internet and Google. And I find the two work together all the time.
¿La guía de qué país triunfa más? ¿Cuál es la que se vende más?
I don't know. Our first guide that was really successful was a guide to Southeast Asia. And it's still a book that many, many people use. And then we did a guide to India that became a big guide because a lot of people went to India. There was a lot of information they needed. And then we started doing guides to Europe, and everybody goes to Europe. So Spain, Italy, France, they are all very popular guides. People go everywhere. But I like the guides to small places, unusual places as well.
Por ejemplo?
I think small islands in the Pacific. You know, you go to some places in the Pacific and the tourists are still discovering them for the first time. I went to the island where President Kennedy swam ashore from his torpedo boat, and you could swim up to that beach and think, Kennedy landed there 70 years ago, and there I am today.
Y estando allí, no piensa, no voy a hacer una guía de esto para que no se masifique.
Oh, I think you have to. If you're a guidebook writer, you always reveal secrets. The secrets are what you want. You want something nobody else knows about. So I think travel writers are terrible people that they cannot keep a secret.
¿Cómo se hace una guía? ¿Cuál es el proceso de creación de una guía?
You have to go there. The first thing I think in any city is you walk. You walk around the city, you find things by looking for them. But a guidebook writer, they have to do everything. They have to be up at dawn to go to the market, and they have to be in the nightclub at midnight. So Spain is a good country because Spain starts early and finishes late.
Para escribir una guía sobre una ciudad española, ¿usted elegiría a una persona local o es mejor que venga alguien de fuera con los ojos de alguien que lo ve desde fuera?
I think any guidebook you need both, because the people you're doing the guidebook for, they're outsiders. They're discovering the place, so you need someone who looks at it with outside eyes, but you also need local experts as well, people who know things. So we always combine both. We always look for local experts to help us, particularly for things like restaurants, but also for the outsiders who see it as a foreigner.
Un restaurante que sale en una guía termina muriendo de éxito. Es imposible ya volver a ese restaurante porque está lleno de turistas. Al final ustedes crean auténticos fenómenos, pero también generan esa sensación de los locales que dicen, este sitio lo hemos perdido para nosotros.
No, you try to be careful. One of the things we have learned is never to be too enthusiastic. Never say, this is the best restaurant in town, because then everybody goes there. So you say, this one is good, and this one is good as well. You try and spread the praise amongst a number of places.
¿Los negocios pagan por salir en la Lonely Planet?
No. We will never take money for something. It's always has to be the writer's own view if this is good or bad. And if we ever hear that a writer has been bribed, has taken money, that's it, finished.
Y sin pagar, pero la gente se pone muy pesada por salir en la Lonely Planet. La gente les ruega salir en la Lonely Planet.
They would very often they like to be in the Lonely Planet, and I know there have been times when they have tried to pay to be in the Lonely Planet, but no, we have to. That's what made the guidebooks work. The fact that there was no bribery involved, that it was honest opinion.
¿Cómo se hace una guía en un mundo en el que en 2023 cada vez es más difícil diferenciar una ciudad europea de otra ciudad en la otra punta de Europa? Los mismos comercios en el centro de la ciudad, las mismas cafeterías en el centro de la ciudad, los mismos tipos de metro atravesando la ciudad.
Yeah, it's true. These days you go to lots of places and, things are the same everywhere you go, that you're wearing the same Nike shoes, you're carrying the same Apple phone. So many things are the same, but things are different as well. Just today in a restaurant here in Madrid, I discovered a new type of gazpacho. I know gazpacho and I like gazpacho, and here was a new gazpacho I'd never seen before. I have to look up the name of it.
¿Puede ser atractivo un destino masificado? Estamos viendo centros de las ciudades absolutamente masificados. ¿Pueden seguir siendo atractivas?
Over-tourism is a big problem, and I think, we see it in Italy, in Venice, we see it in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, and we see it in Spain, in Barcelona. But I think, to some extent it limits. When there are too many people, then they think, I don't want to go there anymore. I'll go somewhere that has less crowds. And one of the things you try to do with guidebooks is encourage people to go to places that are less crowded, to remind them that Barcelona is not the only city in Spain. There are many other cities that are definitely worth going to as well, and perhaps you will enjoy those more because there are less crowds.
Ha mencionado Barcelona, Ámsterdam, Venecia. ¿Usted entiende que los vecinos de esas ciudades estén hasta el gorro, que se genere lo que se llama turismofobia?
Well, they hated the tourism. They were very pleased when the pandemic came along and stopped all tourism. And then they said, when we say stopped, we didn't mean stop all of it. We want to keep some of it. We want to have the employment, the jobs, the money that tourism brings. We just felt there was too much. So I think the problem is to keep a balance, to have some, but not to have too much.
¿Deberíamos dejar de viajar a países en los que no se respetan los derechos humanos? ¿O se puede hacer un turismo moralmente, éticamente aceptable en un país en el que no se respetan los derechos de las mujeres o de los gays y lesbianas?
Yeah, that is a very good question, and it's one that we've often faced, and we've had some serious problems because of it. But I think when people go to these countries, they're witnesses. If women go and travel around Saudi Arabia, they show the people in Saudi Arabia that women are human beings as well. It isn't only men who count. When we go to these countries and say, okay, we may be different to you, but we're human beings as well, I think that's an important thing. So I think travel is important because we have this contact and because we bear a witness to what's happening.
Señor Wheeler, estamos en junio. ¿Usted cómo organiza sus vacaciones de verano?
How do I plan my holidays? There are places I love going back to. We all, the places in Europe that people go back to, and it's a very good sign. If people come back to a place, it shows that what you're doing well. But also, I always like new places. I'm disappointed in a year if I don't go somewhere new. I'm hoping this year I will get to Paraguay and Uruguay in South America because I've not been to them before.
¿Y aquí en Europa, a qué sitio querría volver?
I like going to all of them. I must admit I go to Italy a lot, but I've been to Spain quite a few times, and I've always had a really good time. One time my wife and we drove around Spain, and the region that I found really interesting was Extremadura. I felt this was an area where there weren't so many tourists, that I liked the towns. You felt like a little bit you were exploring something new.
Al fundador de Lonely Planet le enamora Extremadura.
I think we will put that as the Lonely Planet approval.
¿Ha pisado alguna vez un hotel todo incluido?
Oh, I've done everything. At the end of a year, I always look back and I think, well, that was the most expensive hotel and that was the cheapest hotel. When I first started traveling, we used to camp everywhere because camping was the cheap way of doing things. And now if in a year I don't camp somewhere, I'm disappointed. So last year I was in Africa for two weeks camping because that's what you had to do.
¿Hay algún destino del mundo al que no repetiría?
There are places I feel like I've seen them. I don't need to see them again. Sadly, I said that of the Maldives, the islands in the Indian Ocean, that it was a great place if you're on a honeymoon, but otherwise I think, you see it for a week and you've seen all you need to see. So that doesn't attract me to go back. There are other places I would rather go back to.
¿Y hay algún sitio al que no quiera volver porque fue tan feliz cuando estuvo y tuvo una experiencia tan bonita que le preocupa el volver y que haya perdido esa magia? ¿O que usted ya no sea el mismo y que la experiencia no sea tan mágica?
Yes and no. I mean, there are places I've gone to and I've loved them, and then they changed over the years. And that sometimes too many tourists came in, and sometimes they didn't handle that very well. And when I go back, I'm a little bit sad to see they're not as good as I first remember them. But really, it's very rare that I find a place you don't find something interesting. Places that people don't think would be interesting at all, they are interesting.
¿Cuándo envejecen las guías? ¿Cuándo cambian tanto los países, las ciudades, que son irreconocibles en la guía que se escribió hace 15, 20, 25 años?
Yeah, Peter, that is very true. There are places that you go back to and they've changed so much. You just can't believe it. And sadly, it's not always for the better. Sometimes they've changed for the worse. But other places you go back and you think, it was good then and it's still good now. I still like it. I think I remember traveling around Croatia when it was still Yugoslavia, and going back in recent years and thinking, I still like this. This is still an interesting place.
¿No tiene un punto muy, muy romántico el hecho de saber que uno ha creado algo, un tipo de guías que se utilizan como regalo en el momento de yo, a ti, mi pareja, te regalo un viaje y lo que hago es regalarte la guía Lonely Planet? Eso es súper romántico.
Yeah, I think, one thing I always like about our guides is when people come back and say, you made my trip better. And I think particularly with young people who are inexperienced, who don't know how to do things, and they go away and they travel and they come back and say, I wouldn't have been able to do that if you opened a door for me. And sometimes I didn't really open a door. I just gave them a little bit of a push. That is nice to hear that. I'm very pleased to hear that.
Dígame un sitio del mundo, un lugar en el mundo que no se quiera morir sin visitar.
Oh, I don't know. I often think that the place that it's surprising that people think, oh, I want to go there, and then I've been everywhere, and then they go back, and that's Antarctica. Because, I don't know, Antarctica, you go there and you think, that was such an amazing experience. I want to see the ice and the penguins, the seals, the whales. I want to see them again. It's amazing how many people go to Antarctica thinking one time only, but no, they go again and again.
Tony Wheeler, fundador de las guías Lonely Planet, gracias por venir a Hora 25.
Muchas gracias.